Vertebral column steady at 55 inches.
Cranial circumference is significantly larger than expected.
Confirm the markings on the pelvis.
These skeletons, while large, do not represent a distinct giant species, contrary to popular belief.
The painted dawn, the whispered night. Your love's the reason I take flight. Every step, every breath, you're the life in my chest. I see the wonders of your grace, a boundless love I can't erase. This is not...
What if I told you the Bible speaks of giants? Not in metaphor, but real, physical beings, colossal, mysterious, and terrifying. Buried in the early chapters of Genesis is a cryptic passage that has puzzled scholars, theologians, and historians for centuries. Genesis 6. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. Who were they? Sons of God mating with daughters of men. Giants, fallen ones, watchers. Theories span from ancient aliens to divine rebellions, from genetic manipulation to lost civilizations, and somehow it is all there, hidden in the pages of your Bible. But here is the catch. This isn't just about mythology. The Nephilim story is tied to the flood, to human corruption, and to the very boundaries between heaven and earth. Was it judgment of God on a hybrid race? Or something deeper? A cosmic violation that changed human history forever? Why do ancient cultures across the world all speak of titans, demigods, and giants roaming the land? Could these be different versions of the same ancient memory? Why do apocryphal texts like the Book of Enoch, which expands on the Nephilim saga, remain excluded from the Bible yet known by early Christians and Jewish mystics? And most curiously, since the flood wiped out every living being not in the boat, why are they mentioned again after the flood, in the time of Moses? Numbers 13 describes them clearly. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Were they real? And how did they return? These questions don't just point to ancient texts. They hint at an ancient war. A war for the soul of mankind. A war that may have reshaped early civilization and echoes even into modern myths in this video. We're diving into one of the most mysterious and controversial biblical accounts ever recorded. We'll explore every theory, every clue, and every scrap of evidence, from the scriptures, ancient Jewish writings, and archaeological whispers, to finally uncover the truth behind the Nephilim, what really happened in Genesis 6, and where the Nephilim, truly real. Stay tuned. You're about to discover one of the biggest unsolved mysteries to man in the Bible. Genesis 6 begins like a whisper, but it is one that echoes through every page of ancient mystery. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Immediately after, the Bible introduces the Nephilim, the giants. But who exactly were the sons of God? This single phrase has ignited centuries of debate. There are two main camps of interpretation. The first and most traditional in ancient Judaism and early Christianity is the angelic view. Here, sons of God refers to divine beings, rebellious angels who left their heavenly realm, crossed a divine boundary and took human women as wives. The union produced offspring, the Nephilim, a hybrid race of superhuman giants. But others argue differently. The Sethite view claims the sons of God were actually the descendants of Seth, the righteous son of Adam, while the daughters of men were from the line of Cain. In this interpretation, the passage refers not to literal giants, but to moral corruption. Godly people marrying ungodly ones, so which is it? The text itself offers clues. In the Old Testament, sons of God almost exclusively refers to heavenly beings, not humans. In the Book of Job, the same phrase is used when the angels present themselves before God. The ancient Jewish understanding, supported by texts like the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls, overwhelmingly supports the angelic interpretation. Then comes the curious word, Nephilim. The Hebrew root word, NPL, means to fall. Some translate it as fallen ones, others as those who cause others to fall. But what is most shocking is the physical description. A race of giants, mighty men of old, men of renown. These weren't just tall people. They were beings that stood out in size, power, and fear, perhaps even in spiritual authority. And their presence on earth seems to be the final trigger before God decides to wipe out mankind with the flood. Why? What did these giants do that was so evil? The scriptures don't spell it out, but ancient texts suggest they brought violence, chaos, forbidden knowledge, and even cannibalism to humanity. The world had become corrupt, not just morally, but biologically. Genesis 6 isn't just a story about sin. It is a story about interference, a breach between realms, a violation of divine order. And at the center of it are the Nephilim. If Genesis 6 opens the door to the Nephilim, the Book of Enoch kicks it wide open. This ancient Jewish text, once widely read and respected, expands dramatically on the cryptic verses in Genesis. Though not part of most modern Bibles, early Christians, and even the writers of the New Testament were familiar with its content. And in it, we meet a new cast of characters. The Watchers. According to Enoch, the Watchers were a group of 200 angels sent to observe humanity. But what began as a mission observation quickly turned into a cosmic rebellion. The leader, a powerful angel named Shemhaza, and his followers made a pact, not just to defy God, but to descend to earth and take human women for themselves. They didn't just desire them, they wanted to create something, offspring, hybrids. And so, they mated with the daughters of men and birthed a monstrous race. The Nephil, but it gets darker. The Book of Enoch claims these Nephilim were more than just giants. They were destroyers, beings of immense power who taught humans forbidden knowledge, sorcery, astrology, weapon making, seduction, root cutting, enchantments, technology far beyond the age of man. The world, under their influence, spiraled into chaos, and when the Nephilim grew hungry, they turned on mankind. They devoured all the food of the people, and then the people themselves. This corruption, both moral and genetic, was so extreme that God decided to start over. According to Enoch, the flood wasn't just to cleanse sin, it was to erase an unnatural contamination. The Watchers, seeing what they had unleashed, begged Enoch to intercede with God on their behalf. But the answer of God was firm. The Nephilim would perish in the flood. The Watchers would be bound in the abyss, a prison beneath the earth, reserved in chains of darkness until the judgment of the great day. A phrase that echoes in the Book of Jude in the New Testament. This interpretation reframes the Genesis story as a cosmic crime scene. Not just human sin, but divine rebellion, angelic intrusion, and a global reset to restore had been broken. It also raises a chilling question. If ancient texts like Enoch were widely accepted for centuries, why were they removed? Why are we not supposed to read them? What were early scholars trying To hide? And since the Nephilim were wiped out in the flood, how do they appear again later? That mystery is what we'll explore next.
The painted dawn.
Let us address the giant in the room. Were the Nephilim actually giants? Or are we simply misreading ancient metaphors? The Bible seems clear. In Numbers 13 verse 33, the Israelite spies report seeing the descendants of the Nephilim in the land of Canaan. They say, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." That is not symbolic language, that is terror. The Hebrew word Nephilim doesn't explicitly mean giants, but the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, renders it as gigantes. And that word has shaped imaginations for thousands of years. That here is where it gets fascinating. Cultures across the globe speak of giants in Sumerian myths. The Anunnaki were towering beings from the heavens. In Greek mythology, the Titans were gods of enormous size and strength. Native American legends, Norse sagas, Hindu scriptures, all tell of enormous humanoids who roamed the earth, built great cities, and fell in catastrophic wars. Coincidence? Or collective memory? Even ancient architecture adds fuel to the fire. Megalithic structures like Baalbek in Lebanon feature stones weighing hundreds of tons, precisely stacked. Who moved them? Who built them? Some theorists suggest the builders weren't just skilled, they were massive. And then there are the skeletons throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. Newspapers across America reported bizarre findings. Human bones measuring over 8, 9, sometimes 12 feet tall, often buried in mounds, with strange skull shapes and double rows of teeth. These reports were frequent and oddly consistent. Yet today, they're dismissed as hoaxes, misidentifications, or simply erased from public knowledge. Why? Conspiracy theorists argue that institutions like the Smithsonian collected and concealed many of these remains, perhaps to protect a particular narrative of history. Mainstream archaeologists reject this as pseudoscience, but the debate still rages online, in books, and among alternative historians. So what is the truth? Could these ancient accounts of giants be real, not just in myth or metaphor, but in history? Some believe the Nephilim were a lost species of hominids. Others think they were angel-human hybrids whose DNA corrupted the human genome. And some say the term giants was spiritual, that the Nephilim were giants of influence, of violence, of wickedness, not necessarily of height. Still, when the text says, "We were like grasshoppers," it doesn't sound metaphorical. The deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Because whether you believe in literal giants or not, nearly every culture agrees. Someone or something walked the earth in ancient times and left behind more questions than answers. And since those beings were wiped out in the flood, how? Do they show up again in the promised land? That is where we go next. Since the flood was meant to wipe out every living being that didn't enter the ark with Noah, including Nephilim, then how do they appear again? The Bible doesn't stay silent on this. In Numbers 13:33, long after the flood, the Israelite spies report seeing the Anakim, descendants of the Nephilim, in the land of Canaan. And the reaction is immediate fear. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Wait, how is that possible? This is one of the biggest scriptural puzzles. Since the Nephilim perished in the flood, did some of their bloodline survive? Or, more disturbingly, did the Watchers return? One theory suggests that another incursion happened, that the same fallen angels who corrupted humanity before the flood came back and repeated the same rebellion. The text never explicitly confirms this, But their post-flood presence implies something re-emerge. Something ancient. Another view is that a genetic trace of the Nephilim lineage somehow survived, possibly through the family of Noah. Though Noah is described as perfect in his generations, some scholars speculate that his sons' wives may have carried remnants of Nephilim DNA. This could explain how giants reappear. And then there are the names: Anakim, Rephaim, Zamzummim. These are all tribes described as extraordinarily tall and fearsome. Deuteronomy 2 and 3 speak of King Og of Bashan, last of the Rephaim. His bed was over 13 feet long. Coincidence? Exaggeration? Or a real remnant of the ancient giants? The Israelites were terrified. The land of Canaan wasn't just a land of milk and honey. It was a land of giants. That fear caused them to rebel against God and delay their conquest by 40 years. The presence of these beings was so overwhelming that it broke the spirit of an entire generation. Interestingly, the Bible never calls the Nephilim evil in themselves after the flood. But their association with terror, chaos, and opposition, tough people of God remains. So now we're left with a haunting question. If they returned once, could they return again? Some believe they already have, but to understand that theory, we need to step into modern times and look at how the Nephilim have become more than just an ancient curiosity. They've become a warning. The mystery of the Nephilim didn't die in the ancient world. In fact, it has never been more alive. Modern interpretations have taken the ancient texts and launched them into wild, controversial, and sometimes even terrifying territory. From theologians to conspiracy theorists, to sci-fi writers and biblical scholars, everyone wants to know, what were the Nephilim really? Let us start with the Christian world. Some modern theologians still hold to the sons of Seth view, interpreting the Genesis 6 story as a moral lesson about spiritual compromise. But increasingly, more Christians are returning to the ancient, supernatural interpretation that these were angelic beings who broke heavenly law and corrupted mankind with forbidden knowledge. And this opens the floodgates. Authors like Dr. Michael Heiser have reignited interest in the divine council worldview, showing how the Bible hints at multiple layers of spiritual beings, some loyal to God, others in rebellion. Under this view, the Nephilim weren't just historical. They were a part of a broader spiritual war that still affects us today. Now enter the fringe. Ancient alien theory. Popularized by books like Chariots of the Gods and shows like Ancient Aliens, this theory suggests the Watchers weren't angels, but extraterrestrials. They came from the stars, bred with humans, and gave birth to hybrid giants, leaving behind both their offspring and their technology. To these theorists, the Nephilim weren't mythical at all. They were early genetic experiments, and they're coming back. Then there is transhumanism. Some believe that we're repeating Genesis 6 in our own time, through genetic engineering, AI, and efforts to enhance humanity beyond its natural design. They argue that what happened in the days of Noah wasn't just about rebellion. It was about crossing boundaries that should never be crossed. Sound familiar? Even in pop culture, the Nephilim have returned. From Supernatural to Noah, the movie, from video games to anime, their presence is everywhere, distorted, romanticized, or weaponized. But why are we so obsessed with them now? Maybe it is because we sense something ancient is stirring. That the stories weren't just stories. That the boundary between the natural and the supernatural is thinner than we think. And maybe, just maybe, what happened in Genesis 6 wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a warning. For all the mystery and mythology surrounding the Nephilim, the story isn't just about giants or fallen angels. It is about boundaries. Genesis 6 is a cautionary tale, not just of corruption, but of what happens when the divine order is violated. The Watchers crossed a line. They tried to manipulate what God had made, and their actions unleashed chaos that nearly ended the world in many ways. The Nephilim represent more than literal beings. They symbolize what happens when we play God. The flood was more than a judgment. It was a reset, a divine reboot of a world spiraling into self-destruction. Biologically, spiritually, and morally. But even then, evil didn't vanish. It resurfaced, and so did the fear. But here is the twist. God didn't abandon humanity. He gave us Noah. He gave us covenants. He gave us His word. He continually re-established boundaries, not to control us, but to protect us. To keep the spiritual world from bleeding into ours in dangerous ways. And ultimately, He gave us Christ, the one who crushed the head of the serpent, the seed of woman who would undo the corruption of the Watchers, and the sin of man alike. So yes, the Nephilim are terrifying, but they're not the point. The point is that no matter how dark the world becomes, or how deep the corruption runs, God is always working to redeem, restore, and rebuild, even from the ashes of giants. So, who were the Nephilim? Were they literal giants? The hybrid offspring of rebellious angels? Were they symbols of spiritual corruption? Ancient aliens? Or a bit of all of the above? The truth is, we may never know for certain. The Bible gives US glimpses. Ancient texts like Enoch pull back the curtain a little further. History whispers, myth echoes, and across thousands of years, one mystery continues to haunt us. What really happened before the flood? And is it happening again? Whether you see them as supernatural beings or ancient metaphors, one thing is clear. The story of the Nephilim isn't just about the past. It is a warning, a reminder, that some boundaries were never meant to be crossed, that some secrets were buried for a reason. If this video opened your mind or stirred your curiosity, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden mysteries of the Bible and beyond, because this was just the beginning.
I see the wonders in the sky, the painted dawn, the whispered night. Your love's the reason I take flight. Every step, every breath, you're the life in my chest.